Mr. President, I have come to the floor today to talk about the energy bill, and particularly a very important and missing part of the energy bill. But before I turn to that subject, Mr. President, I want to note, particularly with our colleague Senator Stabenow on the floor this afternoon, that I think she is doing extraordinary work on behalf of Flint, the people of Flint, and I want to commend her, Mr. President, and also her colleague, Senator Peters, who are trying to tackle this issue. It seems almost unconscionable that in this age, when there's all this information and technology at our fingertips, a community is put at risk the way Flint has been put at risk. And the idea that innocent children would suffer this way is why it's so important that we move now to address this issue. This is urgent. There are questions that we deal with here in the Senate that, if you take another few months or half a year even, Western civilization isn't going to exactly change. But what my colleague from Michigan has said is what we know about youngsters, and particularly brain development, if you don't get there early and you don't get there quickly, you play catch-up ball for years and years to come. Everything we know about neurological development, my friend knows that my wife and I are parents of small kids, and we're so lucky they're healthy, and they have what a lot of youngsters in Flint aren't going to have. They're not going to have the kinds of problems that my colleague has brought to light here. And I just saw one report in the news, and it's almost beyond comprehension that a state nurse told a Flint patient, and I quote here, "It's just a few IQ points. It's not the end of the world." The idea that a health professional, I guess this has been in the number of the national, publications, just, highlights how important it is that this Congress move and move now. My colleague and Senator Peters, who also is doing a terrific job on this, have indicated that there's some procedural and constitutional, questions and a role for the Finance Committee on which my colleague serves so well. I just want her to know that I am with her and the people of Flint every step of the way, and not just this week and this month. This is going to be a challenge that's going to go on for some time. And I just so appreciate what my colleague's doing, and I'm with her every step of the way. Mr. President, let me turn now to the energy bill that's before us, and I also want to commend the chair, Senator Murkowski, and the ranking member, Senator Cantwell. You don't put together a bipartisan bill in the Energy Committee, which is something I know something about because I was the chair of the committee. I think my chairmanship began and ended before we had the opportunity to work more directly with the President of the Senate, the senator from Colorado. But I look forward to working with him on the committee, and very much appreciate our colleagues putting together this important package. If there's one backdrop to this debate, it's the extraordinary challenge of climate change. In order to meet that challenge and beat back the threat of irrevocable damage that has the climate scientists ringing such loud alarm bells, there are going to have to be some serious changes in energy policy. This legislation, in my view, this bipartisan bill, moves in that direction, and the details of which I intend to get into in a minute. I do want to first discuss a part of this bill that is frankly missing, and it's missing to this debate. And that's because The reality is the heart of America's energy policy is in the federal tax code. The last big energy tax proposal to become law passed in 2009. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, 5 of the 7 hottest years in recorded history have come since then. On the books today is an outdated, clumsy patchwork of energy tax incentives that, in my view, is anti-innovation and nothing short of a confusing, incomprehensible policy that does our country a disservice at a time when we have these great challenges. There are 44 different energy tax breaks, and they cost about $125 billion each decade. Some industries, the oil and gas industry in particular, have some certainty about their taxes with permanent provisions. The fact is, renewable energy sources don't have that certainty. Some technologies get a lot of support. Others get little or none. It is a disjointed system that has far outlasted its sell-by date, and it is ripe for simplification. The amendment Senators Cantwell and Bennett and I introduced replaces this tattered quilt of tax rules with a fresh approach, an approach that I hope will appeal to colleagues on both sides of the aisle. The President of the Senate and I have talked about energy policy being more market-oriented. Well, the kind of proposal we've made here does just that. It supports innovators with fresh, creative ideas. And particularly, I hope my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, because we talked about it often when I was chairman of the committee and also on the Finance Committee, concern about subsidies, a big concern about subsidies, and I'm very concerned about that as well. The amendment that we will be offering cuts the $125 billion price tag in half. In half, Mr. President. So when colleagues say we ought to be cutting back on tax subsidies, that's exactly what this proposal does. It replaces wasteful tax rules with a new, simple group of incentives that have just 3 goals: cleaner energy, cleaner transportation, and greater energy efficiency. Gone would be the system where oil companies get a direct deposit out of the taxpayer account each year, while expired renewable incentives just sort of hang in limbo. And for the first time, fossil fuel burning plants would have a big financial reason to get cleaner by investing in high-tech turbines or carbon capture technology. So that means everybody benefits by getting cleaner, Mr. President. Everybody in the energy sector, renewables, fossil fuel industries, everybody gets the incentive to be cleaner under the amendment that I am offering. The amendment is all about harnessing the market-based power of the private economy to reward clean energy, promote new technologies, and attack climate change. My view is that Congress ought to be doing everything it can to fight the steady creep towards a hotter climate. When you have legions of scientists lining up to warn the American people about the dangers of climate change, and when you have policymakers, business leaders, and investors worldwide saying that clean energy is a 21st century gold rush, this is the kind of bold energy policy transformation, the proposal I offer with Senators Bennett and Cantwell, that ought to become law. Now, this may not happen in the context of the Energy Policy Modernization Act. I think we all understand the rules of the Senate, but I'm very much looking forward to working with my colleagues to build support for this proposal in the days ahead. The lack of the tax provisions in this legislation, in my view, is unfortunate. They ought to be in there. Tax policy is right at the heart of energy policy, but it certainly doesn't undermine my support for a great deal of what is in the overall package. That includes several provisions that I authored and my colleagues and I on the Energy Committee included. One focuses on geothermal energy. It's a proposal that's all about bringing the public and private sectors together to figure out where geothermal has the most potential and getting the projects underway. Another proposal in the package is the Marine and Hydrokinetic Renewable Energy Act, which says that with the right investments and innovations, the oceans and the rivers and the lakes ought to be able to power millions of homes and contribute to a low-carbon economy. And note those words, Mr. President, because we talk a lot in the Energy Committee and my view about these issues, and my view is there's an awful lot of bipartisan support for a lower carbon economy in this country, particularly one that grows jobs in the private sector, and this legislation does that. In addition to promoting low-carbon sources of energy, the legislation will help our communities be significantly more energy efficient. It'll spur the development of a smarter electric grid that cuts waste, stores energy, and helps consumers save money on their utility bills. And finally, it'll permanently reauthorize the Land and Water Conservation Fund, and that, in my view, is a win-win for the rural communities of my state and rural communities across this country. The Land and Water Conservation Fund brings more jobs and more recreation dollars to areas that need an economic boost, and it ensures that future generations of Americans are going to be able to enjoy our treasures for years and years to come. So, Mr. President, I've noted my concern about help for the city of Flint. I think it is so important that in the days and months ahead, when we come back to talk about important public health legislation, because that's really what this is. It's a public health crisis. I hope what we will say is we made a start. We made a beginning. We said it was too important to just delay moving ahead to address these enormous concerns that the families and the children of Flint are dealing with this evening. We have got to ensure that this Congress takes action on this public health crisis quickly. I'm committed to working with colleagues on both sides of the aisle, and as a member of both the Finance Committee and the Energy Committee, I'll have two opportunities to do it, and I think we need to make this bill bipartisan and bicameral as quickly as possible. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor. And I note the absence of quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.